Hey, I have a lot of these stories and I think sharing them may be cathartic for me. This happened to me about 4 years ago, when I was 21 or so. So it's Easter, right? Broad daylight, maybe around 11 a.m. or so. I'm in the fashion district of my big city, which is relatively safe during the daytime. I'd never had any actual run-ins with crazy, even though I would see homeless people and unwell people all the time, talking to themselves in the corners. I'm normally pretty good at keeping my head down and sensing danger before it happens, or so I thought at least. Anyway, so here I am looking for a store with shoes. I passed by this homeless woman who was either on drugs or mentally unwell, perhaps a combination of both. I made a note of her but ignored her, 1 because it's broad daylight, and 2 because it's Easter and there's tons of people around. She was just kinda sitting on the edge of the sidewalk yelling to herself. I go into my store a couple of blocks down, finish up there and pass her again to go to another store. Apparently when I went to pass her by a third time, that was the last straw for her for whatever reason. She suddenly decided she knew me from somewhere. I saw her get up and start to yell at me. "Fuck you, bitch! You stupid fucking whore! You thought I wouldn't know it was you!" She just suddenly charged at me. It all happened so fast. I thought I was just having a leisurely stroll on Easter, so I didn't have my car keys out yet or my pepper spray. I started to run to my car, but she was right behind me. I was kind of against my car at this point and turned around. She was right there. I sized her up. She was very dirty and had sores all over. I thought to myself that I definitely did not want to fight her. Not that I'm a particularly good fighter anyways, but I figured now was not the time to try and learn. I also thought to myself that if I stayed by my car, she was going to damage it in the process of trying to attack me, and I couldn't find my keys in time. She went to sucker punch me in the back of the neck as I ducked. She just barely missed me. This was all within like 10 seconds. It just happened so fast. Nobody was helping, by the way, despite it being a very busy street. I was screaming my head off. I was lucky enough to accidentally run into the last store I had been in. If it had been another store that didn't know me, I think they would have kicked me out for causing a scene. I live in a big city and have had issues like this before where shopkeepers won't help because they don't want the drama. You know, the drama I had nothing to do with either, but I digress. I run in crying and tell him about the lady chasing me. She runs in after me, and I hide behind the counter with him, telling him I need to get to my car and she won't let me. She's tried to attack me. Well, he must have known her from the neighborhood. He held her back for me as I got into my car, and I drove off safely. The whole time she was still screaming, trying to get around him and attack me. I made it to my family's Easter thing safe, but avoided that part of the city for a couple years. I've always wanted to go back and thank that man. I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't there, or how I could have possibly gotten into my car. I had just gotten out of a really shitty relationship with a guy I had been living with for 3 years. He was a really pretty boy who looked like Johnny Depp, but he liked to steal all my money while I was at work and throw crazy parties. I got tired of his stealing and coming home to emo kids asleep all over my house, so eventually I left him. I didn't want anything but my stuff, and I let him keep the house and cars I bought him. I just wanted my sanity back. I moved back in with my granny. I'm her favorite grandchild and she spoiled me a lot. I had recently reconnected with my best friend that I had known since kindergarten, Chris. I was hanging out with him on the back porch one morning when the subject of boys suddenly got brought up. Chris is gay and we often talk about boys together. He asked if I was seeing anybody, and I told him that I was not. It had only been a few months since I left the money leech, and I didn't think I was ready yet to trust anybody. Chris said that he knew the perfect man for me. I said I didn't think there was such a thing. He begged me though to go and meet this guy. I reluctantly sighed and told my granny that I was going to go on an adventure with Chris. We talked as we drove, and he told me that this guy had apparently been in love with me since we were kids. He told me it was this little boy, Quinn, that used to follow me around a lot. I told him I thought Quinn was a lot younger than either of us. He told me that Quinn was just short like I was. He called Quinn and told me to talk to him. I did. He seemed sweet, but a little bit airheaded. We showed up at his house, and he was really pretty. He was also very sweet and had a good job, his own car, and owned his own company even. Needless to say, we started hanging out a lot and eventually started dating. He buys me presents like nice jewelry, Prada sunglasses. He told me that his girl only deserved the best. I told him I couldn't accept all these fancy gifts, but he would just dump them in my car and purse when I wasn't looking, so I learned to just take them without a fight. He wanted to always call me and talk for hours, and wanted me to call when I got home from his house. I thought he was just being sweet and wanted to make sure I got home safely. The reality, though, set in rather quickly. He introduced me to his entire family within a couple days of us starting dating. I usually don't introduce guys to my family until we're serious, but whatever. Upon meeting his mother, I learned that it was her house, and he lived there with her. I also learned that he had no job other than doing odd jobs for his dad. I was just speechless. He had also lied about being my age as well. I was 24 at the time, and he had turned just 18 the day or so before we started dating. I was so upset that I didn't even know how to feel. He begged me not to leave him, and to take him to my play rehearsal the next day. He showed up in my driveway just as I was leaving for the theater. Chris drove him there and told me we needed to sort our shit out. He said if Quinn was gay, he would be all over him, and not to leave him over a few small lies. The whole thing was just awkward. I didn't want to talk to this guy, I wanted him gone. He pulled out a diamond ring and tried to propose to me even. I told him no, but he slid the rock onto my finger anyway. He said all I need to do was think about it. When I got to the theater, shit just went downhill from there. He embarrassed me in front of my friends with his ignorance and childishness, and threw a bitch fit because of my other best friend, Mikey, who gave me a piggyback ride. He stormed out, and then his mother started calling to check up on him. I decided I was done. After rehearsal, I got a friend to go with me to drive him home. I tried to give his ring back, but he wouldn't take it. I left and went to a bar with my fellow actors. I told him that was why I had to take him home early. Driving back though, I suddenly see flashing lights in my rearview mirror and hear yelling. Chris and Quinn are following me. I pull up into the bar and Chris throws Quinn and myself at each other and yells that we need to talk. I broke up with Quinn. He started throwing a bitch fit. I walked into the bar with my friend and spent the night at Mikey's for a few days. When I returned home, I had tons of harassing phone calls. He called me and my grandparents every few hours. He even had Chris help. Everywhere I went, he was there. He stalked me at home, made me run from a theater during a movie, and followed my car everywhere. Chris helped him do all of this. He even pulled a gun on my family while we were outside during Easter. I was helping the little kids hunt eggs. He cruised by several times and then pulled his gun and pointed at us, even the kids. I filed a restraining order that day. I moved in with Mikey so he would at least leave my grandparents alone. I went nowhere without at least 2 guys with me at all times. I thought that at any minute he would just come and kill me. I felt like a deer being hunted in the woods. I was lucky though. He shot up the car of his next girlfriend while her 2-year-old daughter was inside. So I was damn lucky. When I was about 6 years old, Easter was rolling around, and I really wanted a chocolate bunny. I asked my dad to take me to Rite Aid to get me one. He said he was busy. I told him I'd just walk, and he said he was fine with that because honestly, he was a pretty shitty parent all in all. So I embark on the 1.5 to 2 mile walk through rural Louisiana to the store. The houses are pretty sparse. I come up to a 4-way intersection and can see the store just a short distance away. As I approach the 4-way, I see a small green truck, which I think was a Ford Ranger. There were 2 men in it, and the one in the passenger seat was blatantly pointing at me, repeatedly. They were both staring at me now. I was about to cross through a parking lot on the right side of this intersection when I saw the truck whip into it and park between 2 other cars. I then saw the passenger jump out of the truck and crouch down with his fucking hands out, trying to hide between their truck and the vehicle they parked next to. Thankfully, an older woman that used to babysit me when I stayed with my mom had filled my young head with a bunch of stranger danger propaganda. I immediately flipped the fuck out, bypassed the parking lot, and broke out into a dead sprint to the Rite Aid. Once inside, I began to pace around the store a bit and try to calm down. I took a glance through the glass door and saw the truck with 2 guys in it parked right in front of the store. At this point, I knew beyond all doubt what was going on. I asked the old lady at the cash register if I could use the store's phone to call my dad. She said the phone could only be used to call 1-800 numbers for some reason. I burst into tears and started getting hysterical. The manager came to the front and let me use his cell phone, thankfully. I got in touch with my dad, who sent my 2 brothers to pick me up, and by the time they got there, the green truck had already left. In the end, no one fucking believed me. They just nonchalantly said, "So what happened? Something about a kidnapping?" I told them what happened, and everyone just kind of brushed it off. It was never talked about again. That shit makes me furious to this day. I wonder what the hell those scumbags were planning. The thing that troubles me the most is that they could have easily gotten some other kid on some other day and done God knows what, and probably nobody would have even cared. This event took place quite a few years ago, so unfortunately I don't remember everything that happened. I do remember nearly all of it though. Anyway, this happened when I was around 4 to 5 years old on an Easter Sunday. My family always gathers at my grandmother's house to celebrate holidays, birthdays, and so as we do every holiday, my mother and I started our hour-long trip to her house. My mother prefers to live away from all the city commotion, which explains the long drive. We were probably about 20 minutes away from our destination when my mom noticed that we were a little bit low on gas. We pulled into this old, almost rustic-looking gas station with just a handful of customers inside. It was red and white with a few festive decorations outside and lots of Easter stickers on the 2 large glass windows that were on either side of the door. My mom, having taught me not to talk to strangers nor open the car doors for anyone but her, trusted me enough to leave me in the car alone as she went inside briefly to pay for gas. She told me she would be right back before going into the gas station. It felt nice that day, so the windows in the car were down so we could get the breeze while driving instead of the AC. While I was waiting on my mom, I remember adjusting the colorful paper clippings in my Easter basket next to me, then looking out the backseat window. When I looked over, I just happened to see a tall, older man, maybe around 30 or 40 years old, approaching my window. He crouched down slightly and looked at me. "Hi there, what's your name?" I remember him saying. At this moment, I remembered that I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers, so I told the man that my mom says I shouldn't speak to him. He then replied with, "Well, we can be friends then. My name's Charlie, and now that you know, I guess I'm not a stranger, huh?" At the time, I thought that made sense. In my little kid mind, I thought, since a stranger is someone you don't know, then this man wasn't a stranger anymore, because now I knew his name. The man and I had a short conversation that I don't quite remember. All I remember is him telling me I had a nice Easter basket. At this point, though, I started getting a sick feeling in my stomach. Being a child, of course, I didn't understand why. My mom quickly walked out of the gas station and noticed the man immediately. She began approaching the car and quickly asked the man what he thought he was doing. The man seemed in a panic and pulled my door handle violently. He quickly realized that it was locked and proceeded to reach into my window and grab me by one of my wrists. He attempted to pull me from the car. This obviously scared me a lot, causing me to panic and pull against him on instinct. This caused him to let go and take off running. My mom quickly ran to the car and I unlocked the doors. She grabbed me and pulled me into an almost painful bear hug, then inspected me closely and repeatedly asking if I was okay. I ended up with a slight bruise on my arm where he grabbed me, but other than that, I was just pretty shaken up. The reality of what had just happened set in at this moment, and I remember just crying and holding on to my mom right after I said I was okay. I don't remember anything after this point, but I recently asked my mom about it. She said she called the police immediately after. To this day, my mom still says that this was the most frightening moment of her life, and claims that if she had gotten there any later and came back to an empty car, she wouldn't have been able to live with herself. I hadn't thought about this for a while, until just now when an animal charity put out an alert on Facebook. So April last year, I had thought about getting 2 rabbits to accompany my other 2. The 2 I had already were neutered females, so I was looking for a pair of neutered males. Rabbit social hierarchy, lifelong buddies, etc. I was looking on Gumtree for an exercise pen to attach to the one we already had, so that if we did get more bunnies, once bonded there'd be a bigger space for them when they weren't out during the day. I found an advert for one and clicked on it, and saw the owner was also putting her rabbits up for adoption. It had been one of those dumb things. Her kid daughter had been excited for Easter, mom bought her some rabbits didn't want to be picked up, kid made them nervous, eventually became bored of them because they're not like toy rabbits. It's an unfortunately common story. Anyway, I call up and ask about the exercise pen and the rabbits. We arranged to meet the next day when the seller was able to take the morning off. The next day, she met me off the train in her town. More like a village, really. It was really small. We walked to her house. She was a really nice lady, and she had a Belfast accent. This all happening just outside of Glasgow, by the way, and as an English immigrant to Scotland, it was just nice to hear a different accent. On the way, she started telling me about how after I'd called her, her phone had said she had 15 missed calls. About a minute after we'd arranged to meet, her phone rang again. A man with a thick Irish traveler accent had started talking about getting the rabbits from her, without even saying hello. When he'd taken a moment to breathe, she explained that she already had someone coming to see them, and that if it didn't work out, she'd let them know. He sounded angry when she said that, and swore before he hung up on her. Anyway, we get to her house. The exercise pen is exactly what I want. Then I meet the bunnies and fall in love with them. She asked me if I'd like to give them a new home, and I agreed, not just because of how lovely and sociable they were with me within a few minutes of meeting them, but because they were also a bonded pair, and I couldn't stand the thought of them being separated at a shelter. I mean, just after Easter and then Christmas are the worst times for spaces in shelters. Because I was also taking the rabbits back with me, she was kind enough to drive me back to my flat with everything in tow. Later on that day, around 6 p.m., I get a call from her. When she had dropped me and the rabbits back at my flat, she had gone straight to work. When she had gotten home, she found her daughter being comforted by the babysitter. She thought she was probably just upset that the rabbits had gone, but no. Her daughter had answered a knock at the door while the babysitter was making dinner. A big guy with scruffy clothes had looked down at her, grinned, and asked her if she had any rabbits. She said she did have, but they moved house today, and the guy's smile turned angry. He started shouting and pounding his fist on the door, and that's when the babysitter came running. The babysitter had said there was a white transit van parked outside with 2 other guys in there, and the man's accent was Irish, the dialect distinctively traveler. Turns out that when she posted the ad for the exercise pen, it had been from her phone, and Gumtree automatically added her street location on the little map thing next to the username. She had posted a separate ad for the rabbits in the pets for sale section, which I hadn't seen, and that's how they'd found the house. It was a small street in a suburb, so even with a map location, it wasn't a very long street, and they could have easily knocked door to door. The babysitter had to call the police as she forced the door shut. These guys are apparently always being spotted in small newsagents calling people about dogs for sale. They've been arrested before for organizing dog fights, stealing dogs and rabbits from people's gardens. It was only when I saw a rehoming charity on Facebook send out an alert about some Irish chaps in a corner shop holding the classifieds open and ringing about a dog near Perth that I remembered all of this. I guess these guys move around quite a lot. And are very organized. Perth's quite far away from Glasgow. I dread to think what would have happened to my rabbits if I hadn't been looking for a cage that day. It's not the creepiest story to read, I suppose, But to know there are such greedy, heartless people driving around, stealing and buying dogs to fight, and taking rabbits to give dogs the taste of blood, to the point of trying to hurt a kid because they have no bait for their dogs, well, that's creepy as hell.